flowing fabrics, froths of color and motion, and a frenzied sexuality all characterized the nightlife of Paris at the end of the 19th century. This is where the most remembered artists of our time were inspired, where they celebrated, and ultimately where they were undone. But first, allow me to set the scene. After undergoing de-Christianization during the Revolution of 1789, the people of France lacked a place of community gathering and discussion, and so the church was replaced by the café. In Paris alone, the number of cafés went from 4,000 in 1851 to 42,000 in 1885. It is in these establishments that politics and French society were able to be observed, discussed, and created, much to the dismay of the French government. The cafés were heavily policed, so much so that reading the newspaper out loud was banned. Due to the casual, social atmosphere of these cafés, working-class people were able to discuss among one another and create unions, discuss unfair labor policies, and injustices done by their government. As a result of the café's political power, much of the primary sources on the culture have been destroyed by the French government. Many come from court proceedings or from food historians, but besides this, much of what existed within the café remains lost to time. These spaces offered a respite for those who were outcasted by society by allowing them to be part of a community. These cafés are where painters would go to discuss their next paintings and to be inspired, instead of their master's studio, as previous artists had done. These nuanced and complex pieces ushered in a new era of art, that of the post-impressionist. One of the major players in this movement, known as the father of modern print advertising, was Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. Born as the son of two first cousins, he faced many health problems and injuries to both legs, which left him unable to walk unassisted and short of stature. He had incredible talent from a young age, capturing the movement of horses with incredible dynamism, which evolved later to capture the fluidity and grace of the dancers he met in Paris. He moved there in 1885 to study under Fernand Cormon, alongside Vincent van Gogh and other contemporary artists of this time. What separated Toulouse from his contemporaries, however, was his focus on the duality of these women. The separation between the stage and the personal identity of the dancers was something that Toulouse depicted frequently, often painting his subjects dressed in their performance attire in intimate moments off stage where the viewer is not being considered. During this time, women's role in society had shifted drastically, from not being permitted in public spaces to becoming café owners, employees, performers, and larger parts of society as a whole. Nowhere is this duality more present than in the piece La Goule arriving at the Moulin Rouge with two women. In this composition, three women stand in the center, with both figures on the sides being partially excluded from the piece, allowing for the central figure to take full focus. The painting is of Louis Weber, also known as La Goule, or the Glutton, a dancer who captivated audiences with her confident sexuality and intense expression. While he depicted her in several of his paintings, this one is notable for how it walks the line between the subject's two identities, that of the performer who catered to a male audience who saw her as a sexual object, and the person Louis Weber, who was likely a lesbian, which would have been very common for performers at this time. She wears a transparent gown with a dramatically plunging neckline as she stares directly at the viewer with a defiant expression. She links arms with the two women accompanying her, both of them dressed fully in black, presumably her lovers. In the background, the interior of the Moulin Rouge can be seen, as well as a man in a top hat, who is pushed to the back of the composition. These male patrons are simply an afterthought to the dancer's true inner world and desires. While studying under Cormon, he was introduced to the art of Japanese prints by Vincent van Gogh. Lautrec and Gogh were both heavily influenced by the woodprint's vibrant color selections and the compositions, which would inform Lautrec's graphic approach to shapes and vibrancy, becoming a major component to the look of the post-impressionists movement. These stylistic sensibilities can be seen in this piece, as the color palette remains limited to only about 6 or 7 different colors. Toulouse was fascinated by the liminality between the public and private lives of these celebrities, the ambiguity of existing not as a performer and not in personal life, but existing as a celebrity in these relaxed social spaces. Here Weber is depicted with lovers, not on stage, and yet she still presents herself as what people expect of her, as La Goule, the performer. Lautrec would later pass on in 1901 from syphilis at the age of 37. While his career was short, his careful observation and talent for capturing the energy of these performances kept these paintings relevant and modern. His incredible graphic intuition has inspired the next generation of artists, such as the pop icon Andy Warhol and countless others. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to W Scott Haine, whose research on Parisian cafes was a huge inspiration for this video. Also, shout out to Professor Debin. My sources for this video were The Café, Arena of Cultural Modernity and Political Consciousness in the 19th Century Paris by Arazoo Ferozan, The Dancers of Toulouse-Lautrec, Public Lives and Private Performances by Mary Weaver Chapman, The One and Lonely, Forcing Empathy for the Subjects of Henri Toulouse-Lautrec by Tara Aiken, The World of the Paris Café by W Scott Haine, The Thinking Space by W Scott Haine and Leona Ritter, and From Drinkseller to Social Entrepreneur, The Parisian Working Class Café Owner, 1789 to 1914, by W Scott Haine.